And in our modern day, it is celebrated on the 1st of May, May Day, and a lot of um, celebrations and other rituals have come into the 1st of May. It's become a holy day, a social justice day. It's become many things. And I just learned that perhaps the old pagans long ago followed lunar cycles, and they didn't have a calendar like we do that has alerts or that you can write things down. But in our time now, Beltane is celebrated yesterday, 1st of May. And that's what we're going to look at, some of the pagan teachings around that and how they can be helpful to us in our faith. Um, and it also happens to be today Orthodox Easter. So the Orthodox Church and the church that came out of the Catholic Church, which birthed the Protestant churches, celebrates Easter on a different day. There was a whole there was a whole debate called the Synod of Whitby in the UK between this king and queen because she celebrated Lent and Easter at a different time. So if you've got like 70 days of Lent in a household, it might create some tension, and that was creating tension in the castle. um, so for most of the church, they switched dates to Easter, but the Orthodox and what was the Celtic Christian Easter Sunday is today. So I'd like to send a blessing to our Orthodox Christian brothers and sisters. And to celebrate that, and because there's such a crossover for me between Beltane and Easter, sometimes it falls around the same time if Easter's late, and in the Celtic and Orthodox tradition, Easter and Beltane coincide often. There is parallel, so I thought we'd sing about that. There was a song that we did for Easter Sunday called "Now the Green Blade, Now the Green Blade Rises." I'd love to sing that again with y'all. And happens to be one of my favorite hymns. I don't know if you know this one. Do you all know this one? Have you come across it before me? It's a traditional Easter song in the UK, but I'm not sure that you sing it much over here. Now the green blade rises from the buried grain, wheat that in the dark earth many years had lain. Love lives again, that with the dead has been. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green. In the grave they laid him, love whom we had slain, thinking that he never would wake to life again. Laid in the earth, like grain that sleeps unseen. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green. Up he sprang at Easter, like the risen grain. He that for 3 days in the grave had lain, up from the dead, my risen Lord is seen. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green. When our hearts are saddened, grieving or in pain, by your touch you call us back to life again. Fields of our hearts that dead and bare have been, love is come again, like wheat that springeth green. got some readings for us now. I'm going to start with one of the Psalms. This is an interpretation of Psalm 104 by Christine Robinson. I use her interpretations often. I am awestruck, Holy One, at this beautiful and boundless universe, gestated over eons with love and care. Your creative intent envelops the world like a cloak. I see it shining in the heavens, hear it whispering in the winds, feel it crackling in the fire. For you energize the dust of the universe, the galaxies, the stars, the planets, right down to this jewel of an earth. You birthed her like a golden babe from the fires under your heart. She cooled, wrapped herself in water and in air. The waters receded, the mountains rose, storms shaped and softened the landscape, and in time she gave birth to life in her seas. In the eons, life evolved into myriad forms, each with its own niche in your scheme. With your love, she taught each its place, its work, its song. And humankind, you birthed us too, gave us the world as our home and food, bread to eat, wine to make our hearts glad, herbs for healing, and oil to soothe our skin. You gave us many songs, many powers, and put a restlessness in our hearts. We could seek you always. O Holy One, how manifold are your works. In your love and play you have birthed them all and raised them up. I will sing your songs all my days and care for all you have created and keep my heart ever open to your love. I feel like we can all go home now. It's just, wow. Please Google Psalm 104, Christine Robinson, and you'll find her blog. I'm going to move into John O'Donoghue because he takes some of that awe and majesty and praise and wonder and then places it into the context of a very human life. And I feel like his words can really help us stop acting small. Rumi's always asking us, stop acting so small. So here's the John O'Donoghue reading. Does anybody know this one? It's called For a New Beginning. If anybody knows it and loves it, they're welcome to read it. Otherwise, I will. This is from the book To Bless the Space Between Us. Here we go. In out of the way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the grey promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon soon you will hum in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Love it. John O'Donoghue was a priest, Catholic Irish priest, and became a poet and ended his life, I think, as a married man. Lovely guy. All right, got another song for you because we're talking about Beltane, so it's all about story and song, really. Let me get the music first. I've probably memorized it, but you're all watching and I might get nervous. So 400 years after the crucifixion of Jesus, about that time, St. Patrick, now he was an English guy, was over in Ireland after training as a Christian and as a monk. And he is bringing this new message of Christianity to Ireland, which is not Christian. It's also outside of the jurisdiction of the Roman Empire, right? It's a pretty wild place. It's the edge of the civilized world. Barbaric, perhaps. Um, in Scotland and Ireland, we're a wee bit wild at this time. I'm very proud of that part of my history. And it's 400 years after Easter. It's Easter Sunday, Celtic Easter Sunday. And St. Patrick, who's not yet St. Patrick yet, Patrick is lighting a fire and doing the traditional prayers for Easter. But it happens to be Beltane. Happens to be Beltane. And there's a really big Beltane festival happening on the hill over. And just as the king is getting ready to go and light the fire, he looks over to the next hill and he sees this bonfire. Somebody else has lit the holy bonfire and he's furious. And he sends some horsemen to go and kill that person. And his chief druid, who later becomes a priest, tells him, actually, king, it's much worse than that. There's a prophecy here. And the prophecy is that if anybody lights a fire on Beltane before the king, that fire will never, ever go out. And the king's furious. It's like, put that fire out. So meanwhile, here's St. Patrick celebrating the holy resurrection of Easter. And he sees horsemen coming to put out his fire and his own inner life fire. So he starts praying like crazy. And this is what I'm going to sing for you is the legacy that we've inherited of his prayer. It's much longer. It has a whole load of really weird things in it. If you want a laugh, go and Google St. Patrick's breastplate and see some of the things that he was frightened of. The evil eye of women being included in them. I didn't include that in the song. This is Andy Moss's version of The Deer's Cry. And it's called that because the legend says that either St. Patrick turned into a deer and ran off, or I think it's more likely a herd of deer came in between him and the horsemen, and there was probably a whole load of omen protocol to do with animals. When I was growing up in a wee fishing town, if a seagull landed on the fishing boat, the men had to come back and go back into harbour and not go out fishing that day. Superstitions are part of this culture. So, what I want you to notice in this prayer is how the elements are wrapped around the person saying the prayer, St. Patrick. And the Christ is treated no differently. As also, Christ is placed all around. It's a very, what we call pagan way of praying, which is you place yourself on the sacred land and then you place the sacred all around you. God is not off planet in that way of seeing. I rise today through the strength of heaven, light of sun, radiance of the moon, splendor of fire, speed of lightning, swiftness of wind, depth of the sea, stability of earth, and firmness of rock. I rise today through God's strength to pilot me, God's eye to look before me, God's wisdom to guide me, God's way to lie before me, God's shield to protect me from all who shall wish me ill, afar and anear, alone and in a multitude, against every cruel, merciless power that may oppose my body and soul. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ when I lie down, Christ when I arise, Christ when I take rest, Christ to shield me. Christ in the heart of everyone who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me. I just read in the chat that Glynis knew the poem. Is that the John O'Donoghue poem that you had at your wedding? Well, we're going to get into the lovers in a little bit, but I'm not quite there yet. So that synchronicity is very, very important today. So that's one of the stories that comes from the Celtic Christian Church about Beltane. Clearly shows that fire and fire ceremony are important, and that's what we're taught today, that Beltane is one of the times of fire. I want to share with you some archetypes. So I've got this book here, The Wild Wood Tarot, and we're going to look at some of the images in it because they're very, I find them very enlightening. I often, the way that I tend to read tarot is that I'll look at the cards and I'll look at it like an icon rather than do a divination thing. But this is one of the modern ways that people in townsfolks connect with the green man and the green woman. I'm going to share some of the slides. And I have to say, I am very strongly interfaith leaning. I'm not frightened of the prayers of other traditions. If divination and pagan, or what people would call witchcraft, is scary to you, you don't have to take on any of the things I'm saying. Just need to listen for where it informs my faith and apply that to yourself. I um, I welcome the wisdom of many, many traditions. And um, here's the first card. So I've got it here in my hand. And it's very symbolic of a pagan way of seeing the natural world and the year, right? So that tree there, the tree of life that has the door in it, has all the seasons, all the seasons. And then in front of it is a labyrinth, that holy journey into the still place in the middle where you meet the sacred, and then back out again, and eventually we join into the tree of life. I often have an image of us as being like one small branch or a twig on this giant ancestral tree that is timeless. Right. So that's the kind of Beltane is the greening, is the section in that tree that is full of, it's just come into fruition with these bright green leaves. And it's often talked about as the green man and the green woman. So traditionally, people tend to only talk about the green man. But in this tarot deck, they have both. And I'm going to read you a little bit about it. First of all, from the green man, The green man is a symbol of the flourishing heart of the male aspect of nature, one of the most ancient images of the connection between humankind and nature. And his face looks out from stones of churches throughout the Celtic lands. Uh, blah, blah, blah. His symbolism and depiction can be fearsome and frightening as he protects the wild beasts of the forest. They know his voice and his presence well, for he is as much at one with them as he is with the spirit of the land. And he has an interconnection between nature and the beasts, and they are intertwined in him. The green man is ever vigilant and in his guardianship of the sacred land. His warning to respect the laws of nature and the beasts of the forest are best heeded. And his challenge to those who abuse his generosity can be fierce and severe indeed. Yet his heart is great and his spirit is warm and full of primal joy. His face is not hidden from those who can see through the thickly tangled fronds that encompasses and enfolds the earth. His bounty is rich and nutritious and soaked in the golden rays of the fertile summer sun. And the feminine aspect of that, according to this book, I mean, for me, the greening, I call it, is more like a tree. It doesn't have a human face. So therefore, it doesn't have a gender. But for some people, it has a gender, and I don't want to discount that. So where is the feminine force different? Sovereignty of the land. And it's balancing of the polarities and the energies and giving life and blessing everything under the sun. So that, let me come back to myself for a second before I move on. I wanted to show you those archetypes to help you see what a pagan might be seeing if they look at the forest. They look for the faces in the trees. They look for how it is speaking to them. How are they connected with the beasts? How is the primordial wisdom held in nature speaking to them? And so much of that is about being awake to the time of year. And where are you in your life? I've got a wee prayer for us too. I've shared this one before. It's the pagan book of prayer. The warm time is here. Time to work and time to rest. Time to celebrate outside. Time to prepare the harvest. All about us, the land spirits are singing. All about us, the deities are speaking. Help me to listen. All you divine beings, may I hear your voices. So I'd like you to unmute for a second and tell me about where that greening, that flourishing, what is flourishing in your gardens? Remember, it was snowing here recently, so I am not in the Beltane place. I'm in Vermont, which we're not quite there yet, but you are in the Pacific Northwest. So tell me, where are you seeing this greening energy flourishing in the world around you? What are the plants? Don't be shy.
Sugar snap peas.
The trees, the maple trees, leaving out of the maple trees.
I'm at church and it's looking absolutely beautiful.
Perfect.
The rhododendrons that I had at my mom's memorial are all in bloom right now.
Beautiful.
And my lilacs are just spectacular this year.
Are they white or lilac?
I have one white and the rest are lilac.
Mm. The bees love them. The bees will be having a wonderful time with you guys.
Yep.
I
Good
haven't
thing.
seen a bee yet.
Yeah. My camellias have more flowers than I've ever seen in the 30 years I've lived here.
Oh, praise for that.
My
Vine
cherry, Go ahead.
Just going to say the vine maples are just leafing out in that beautiful green with a little bit of red.
I have flowers on my strawberries and broccoli sprouts to pick on my broccoli plants.
Wow, that's amazing.
I have lettuce and kale.
Mhm.
Azaleas are out.
Oh, azaleas. Thank you, Bev.
My
Jane, did
cherry is raining blossoms all over, just raining.
I wish I was there. You make it sound so amazing. You know, one of the things that every single person that we've seen their face or heard their voice, if we can't see their face, there's such joy in witnessing this beauty, this abounding beauty. How do we take that energy into ourselves and be transformed by it, huh? So for me, Beltane is about witnessing the power of the sacred yes. That I don't know what it would be called because it's not really a prayer. That quote from Angela of Foligno about the world is pregnant with God. The world is pregnant with God. I'm just awestruck by it. I love it. I want to go up to the plant. When I see them, I like to put my face up to the plants and sniff it. And one of my favorite things to do is to try and get little bits of dew off the baby leaves of the vine maples or the lilacs. And, you know, it's the same with creatures as well. Kittens. I'm highly allergic to cats. But every time I see a kitten, I just want to put my face in and just like, oh, have a little cuddle with this cute little life emerging creature. There's something in us that responds to this beautiful yes. So there's a greening force in the natural world that I think of as very akin to the life force of life. And for how I try and respond to that is by stepping in to meet the green man and woman, the greening of the tree, the fierceless call for me to be flourishing and be myself, stepping into our fullness. Now, I have to say there's a few cultural problems in our archetypal thinking that can really get in the way of Beltane and this green man, green woman thing. I want to name them so that we can sift them out. So we're moving into the time of the light of summer and the strength of the sun, and that casts great shadows. So it's a really good time for us to look at some of our shadows so that we can work around them. So what is this shadow? I'm talking about power and what power is. And also I'm talking about sexuality. A big part of May is about the fertility of the natural world and breeding and sex and intimacy. Like the culture where I come from is that the farmer and it was always the farmer's wife, it was traditional, would go and have sex in the fields to help bless the crops. There's something about our fertility, our attraction, our love that can be between us as humans. It's really important. And all this stuff can get corrupted by religions of all kinds, all kinds. So I want to just say that if we look at power, silence is the language of God. The power is more akin to the silence of the stars than a battle cry. And so is this courage of stepping into our fullness. It's not Superwoman, Superman, or the healthy knight and the warrior queen. No, it's far more nuanced. I mean, the courage to say yes to life could be sitting quietly with somebody who's younger than you on their deathbed. And courage feels more like holding a fragile baby than it does a lion roaring like a lion. And in those life-giving moments that define us, I think people receive their power, right? Like, for example, I'm not a mother. I've never been at birth. So all you mothers there, correct me, unmute yourselves if I'm speaking out of touch here. But where does that primordial scream that births the baby come from. I think that in a situation as extreme as that, we receive a grace and a blessing. It flows in and through us. This vessel way of being is really important when we're understanding power. The power of the river that flows through us is not our power. When we start yielding power and abusing it, terrible things can happen. And I think our sacred path is about how we respond to channeling that power, how we give it away, how we are in service to it. This is a very Christian side of me, clearly, about the servant king. Um, and there's a song that they used to sing when I lived in the Bible Belt in Australia that made me really uncomfortable. It was the servant king, and it would talk about the hands that had scars in them flinging the stars into space and worshipping the servant king. And I was very early on in my Christianity, and I think I rightly objected to Jesus doesn't want us to worship him. But I wrongly misunderstood that there was something about the Christian resurrection and his life that allowed him to merge with this power that did fling the stars into space, this merging with the greening, this sacred yes. So Beltane is both about fertility and fiery power that is given to us. But I want us to remember that people that hold true sacred power usually appear as patient, open, and able to hold both joy and sadness in their hands. And I would like to sing about that with you all. I got a wee song about St. Kevin, another Celtic saint. Oh, they're all coming out today, but I suppose it is Beltane. So my friend Richard wrote this song. So the story of St. Kevin is that he lived in a tiny little cell that just had a little opening for a window. And when he was praying, it was so tiny that, like this screen here, his arm went out the window as he was praising God, and into it came a blackbird who then built a nest and laid some eggs. The eggs hatched, and eventually, after many, many weeks, the wee birds flew away, and St. Kevin got his life back and his arm. So that's the story about St. Kevin, but it really teaches us about yielding to that life that flows through us. And it's a lovely wee song. Hope you enjoy it. Open hand, ready for blessing beyond our choosing. Open hand, prepare for goodness out of the blue. Should a free blackbird choose to nest here, laying her gifts in my life? Or a breeze-born seed come to rest here, growing its gifts in my life? Open hand, ready for blessing beyond our choosing. Open hand, prepare for goodness out of the blue. Open hand, prepare for goodness out of the blue. So I've got one more card for us from the tarot. So this is the actual Beltane one, which is the Lovers of the Forest. And I think that the sacred union of two people, regardless of genders, regardless of whether they're married, in this hand fasting that we're looking at here in this picture, might only have been for a year. Different. They think that the concept of marriage and when people lived much shorter lives was different than it is now. I mean, you'll have your own opinions about who is allowed to engage in sexual intimacy. But for me, my first relationship with my first girlfriend when I was 18 was so important. It really helped me see my own worth, love another person, cherish, be cherished. It opened me to begin to be able to understand um, love in a way that helps me in my faith now. How do you love God? How would I be able to do that if I had never had sacred relationships? And I have to say, this is another area where the church has contained sexuality to, first of all, heterosexual people, and also as a lower path in traditional monastic tradition. Celibacy is seen as a higher path. We've followed the teachings of St. Paul. I don't know why he decided that celibate people are more holy than married people that birth and bring life into this world. Has anybody seen how incredible it is to be a parent? Anyway, going off in a rant, I have to say that I have really revolutionized a lot of the traditions of my culture around sexuality and it being sacred. My grandfather, who's also a minister, believed that sex was only for procreation. He was a very, very unhappily married man. And my grandmother, who I loved so much, told my mother that surely the good Lord could have thought of a better way to bring new life into this world. There is something about the sacredness held in our bodies, in touch, in oxytocin, that is so important and doesn't stop just because you separate or because somebody dies. There's a really profound mystery in this. But belting is about that point of union, and I'm running out of time. So I will put the description for this card onto the page that I created for you all. Let me post that in. I also have posted a Beltane concert I did with Alana Lewandowski on the page. So simondevoyle.com/Suquamish if you're watching on Facebook. That is a private page that I create for the church, and I will post this card and the description so you can have that as homework, because we'll need to move on with our service now. So in summary, what does Beltane teach you? Well, it teaches you to find your sacred place of balance within the web of life. It teaches us to listen to the beingness of nature, the creative genius held in the forest, in the plants, in the garden, and in ourselves. It teaches us that we belong to this wild earth. Teaches us to protect, cherish, and nurture life in all its diversity. Unconditional love, belonging, oneness with God and creation sounds very much to me like the way that Jesus lived his life. So we're going to move into communion now, but before we do that, I have a beautiful blessing from my friend Christine.
Listen to how everything sings. The streams and stones, leaves and branches, fish and fur-covered ones, birds leading the chorus. See how your desire to praise is echoed in every living thing. How in quiet moments, the heart is moved to gratitude for all of creation, for the lavish abundance of it all. How nothing is earned, no achievements are needed. May you simply show up with breath, blood, and bones, and your loving attention to hymns erupting everywhere, until you can no longer tell where yours begin and nature's ends.
Thank you for listening to my reflection. We're going to move into prayers of the people now, and then into increase our faith boldly. Help us to love all life, not just human life and those we recognize ourselves in, boldly. Encourage us to act for justice, boldly. In the name of a God more beautiful and enormous than we can describe, we pray. Amen. Invite us to pass the peace. Here's another setting of that Beltane beautiful prayer. I'd like to close by weaving this around us. Christ in me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ beneath, Christ above, Christ on my right and on my left, Christ in me, Christ in you, Christ in us, Christ in us. One more time, but let's say peace. Peace with me, peace before me, peace behind me, peace beneath, peace above, peace on my right and on my left, peace in me, peace in me, peace in you. Peace in us. Dear ones, I have another church that's waiting for me, but please stay for coffee time. And I want to thank you for gathering, and I'll see you next week. I don't need those words. The blessing of Christ be in and around you. And well, if